Okay, just to remind members that the meeting is recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. I've also been asked to continue to remind you about the enhanced new audio and video equipment in committee rooms, so side conversations are likely to be picked up by microphones. Just all those in the public gallery, to remind you to turn off your mobile phones or at least put them onto silent, please. If members have any further declaration of interest than there was from the first meeting, please declare it now. Okay. Item 1, apologies. Nicola Brogan.
Yeah, Nicola sent her apologies, yeah.
Any other apologies? No. Okay, draft minutes, agenda item 2. Refer you to pages 2 to 11 in the table papers of the draft minutes dated the 2nd of May 2024. Any comments, or are you content that I sign them? Great, thank you. Okay, Chair's business. I'd just like to put on record that in recent news from the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, he's urging farm businesses who have not yet submitted their 2024 single applications to do so before midnight on the 15th of May. Completing applications before the deadline will avoid late claim penalties and will allow the Department to issue prompt payments from the 2nd of September. The online application service is available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. Also, at last week's meeting, we considered SL1, the draft Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and agreed to ask officials to attend here to discuss the matter further. Further information at this week's meeting. Due to the availability of officials, this will be considered at next week's meeting of the 16th of May. Just to inform you that they can't come today, and but hopefully next week. Okay. Matters arising. There's just one issue that I have to note here, and I refer you to pages 7 to 12 of your pack. The Department's response dated the 1st of May 2024 in reply to our letter of the 19th of March. It's a follow-up from the oral briefing on the 18th of April requesting further information on the process of verifying emission records from businesses and the nature of the role of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency in auditing this information. The Department has attached information to clarify this process. Member, have you any further queries? Patsy, yeah?
Just the odd quirk of a thing. At paragraph 2 of the response there, it says there's no requirement for UK ETS or accredited verifiers to have a physical office in the UK or to be a legal entity registered in the UK. Now, I don't know, maybe it's me just finds that odd. How can you hold legally an entity to account if it isn't registered?
In the UK?
The UK, or maybe I don't know if it's legally registered. I presume it's legally registered somewhere else.
Okay.
Making that, it's just that it bounced out of the page at me. It just looks odd.
Yeah. In what particular paragraph was that 2, did you say?
Paragraph 2, the ultimate, the last sentence there.
There's no requirement for UK its accredited verifiers to have a physical office in the UK.
I can understand that bit, that's okay.
Yeah.
Or to be a legal entity registered in the UK. That, to me, just reads odd. I'm sure maybe there's some great explanation for it, but it just reads odd in terms of accountability and how you basically have legal.
It's a good point. Good point, Nancy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other points? Happy to move on. Okay, thank you. Go on to agenda item 5, which is the legislative consent motion on the Pet Abduction Private Members Bill UK Government. We have an oral briefing from RAISE members. For this item, I refer you to the briefing notes from RAISE at pages 14 to 18 of your pack. and also to the written evidence we have received from the USPCA, Cats Protection and Dogs Trust. We also anticipate a written response today from the PSNI. The other written responses are at pages 19 to 28 of your pack, and from the Kennel Club at page 13 of the table of papers. There is also a clerk's memo at pages 29 to 30 of your pack. At the end of today's meeting, we will consider the draft committee report on the LCM, which is to be led in the business office by the end of play on Friday the 20th of May, which I'm sure I don't have to tell you is tomorrow. So it's over to Mark Allen here, of Research Officer at the Assembly. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter this morning. I suppose just by way of context, it's not a bill paper that we would ordinarily do. Simple reason being it's an LCM, which we don't do bill papers for. So the briefing is really a short briefing note, and I suppose the emphasis in the briefing note, as you mentioned, Chair, on pages 14 to 18, is really to look at the Northern Ireland specific considerations emerging from the pet abduction bill, which is scheduled to have the legislative consent motion in the coming weeks. There is maybe more detailed analysis of the bill provisions that was actually conducted by colleagues equivalent to myself in the House of Commons and House of Lords libraries, and the links to those papers are available in the briefing note. In very basic terms, I suppose it's important to flag the fact that the provisions of the bill deal with competencies which are devolved. But I suppose the context is that the bill was introduced in Parliament in December 2023, when neither the Assembly or our Executive were functioning. The actual bill itself is composed of 7 clauses, and I suppose the meat and the bones here is the fact that it creates 2 new offences of dog abduction and cat abduction. I suppose the interesting thing from us looking forward as well is that the bill would also afford the DAERA Minister with the powers through secondary legislation to create similar abduction offences for other animals kept as pets. Also, I want to flag just the conviction of an offence under the provisions of the bill in Northern Ireland would see convicted persons being liable, so this is for either an abduction of a dog or cat, for a maximum prison sentence of 5 years, a fine, or both. I suppose also just for context, the bill has received broad cross-party support in the UK Parliament, and indeed it's in the Lords at the minute, and any amendments have been minor in nature. 3 very specific issues just that I want to flag for consideration, and they are as follows. Firstly, in relation to a local evidence base, I think there remain questions around how extensive pet theft is in Northern Ireland. And I didn't have a lot of time to look at this, but the data was hard to find. The PSNI's published crime stats, the annual report, doesn't disaggregate property theft at this point in time in relation to cats and dogs. They would be counted under that theft of property. There are, I suppose, instances where freedom of information requests from different stakeholders have yielded information. So the police, it would suggest, can disaggregate. It's simply not publicly published, and I suppose it'll be interesting to see even what you as a committee receive from the PSNI, hopefully later today. In relation to that one FOI request, which I will flag, and I did focus on dogs here, there was a request in 2023 which established, based on PSNI data, that there have been 215 dog thefts across the last 6 years for all of Northern Ireland. So that was an average of 35 per year across Northern Ireland. Now, when you take that in context, I suppose our overall dog population, whilst there are unlicensed animals, if you take even as the licensed dogs, the councils between April and December 2023 had issued just shy of 100,000 licences. So if you take the 35 thefts as a proportion of the 100,000, it's about 0.035% of the population. I didn't really find any data on cats, but to be honest, I didn't search extensively, and I did look funny in the pack. I saw that there have been a number of other FOIs that a couple of the Cats Protection, for example, yielded. So that's where I'll leave that in terms of evidence. In terms of local opinion on the bill, again, quite hard to find any specific public commentary or submitted evidence to the Westminster bill progress or process. The Kennel Club, the Dogs Trust and the Cats Protection, which are national groups, would have all have local remit or local representation or local members, have all welcomed the bill. Specific local stakeholders, USPCA at the time I had written the paper, hadn't publicly commented, but I suppose it is of note for members just to recognise the fact that as far back as 2005, the USPCA had been campaigning in relation to pet abduction issues, specifically with regard to pets being abducted for the purpose of blooding dogs that were bred for illegal dog fighting. So that the issue has been on the radar, it's just there was no direct public comment on the actual bill at that time. And finally, just the last thing I want to leave with you is I suppose I have it flagged there as a sentencing anomaly. And I suppose, as I said earlier, if you're found guilty of an offence of cat abduction or dog abduction under this bill, you could be subject up to a 5-year prison sentence, a fine or both. There is an anomaly created by this, and this indeed is flagged in the House of Lords Library briefing paper, as the existing offence provisions for theft of property, which can include pets, for GB are set out in the Theft Act 1968, Section 7, and that can result in a 7-year term for imprisonment upon conviction on indictment. In effect, I suppose that the new offences around dog and cats abduction under the proposed bill then would have a lower maximum penalty than those provided by the existing provisions dealing with theft. And I suppose the question was asked, and I just pose it again, is that a deterrent? Because you potentially move from a 7-year sentence to a 5. I suppose also important to recognise that issue, if it is an issue, is potentially more acute in Northern Ireland, given the fact that the theft of property offences and associated penalties here are dealt with under the provisions of the Theft Act Northern Ireland 1969. And Section 7 of this 1969 Act highlights the fact that a person found convicted in an indictment of the theft of property can be liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. So longer than the GB provision at this point. So that's really all I have to say at this point. We didn't have a lot of time to comment on it, and I'm conscious where but I'm happy to take any questions if
Thank you, Mark. Just 2 quick points from me, actually. From what you said, I'm assuming the legislation puts in place that if there's a theft reported, it's a criminal investigation by the police.
That's my reading of it, yes, Chair.
And the local councils have no input into it?
I've seen nothing in either the commentary or the comment or the process of the bill which would suggest that.
Okay. And my second point is around your last issue around the sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
So are you indicating that there is already legislation in place under the property theft that would allow for convictions against people who would steal cats or dogs but it's under property theft?
I think that's the broad point I'm making is that yes, pets can be classed as property.
Okay.
And there are existing legislative provisions.
Yeah. That's it.
Maybe there's one for the department, but getting down here, if you put yourself in the position of the police officer coming out to try and identify a black cat, and maybe in an area there's 7, 8, 9, 10 black cats.
Yep.
They mentioned microchipping here. Is there a suggestion that all animals that would fall within this legislation are going to have to be microchipped?
I'm not aware of any proposals to that effect, but what I would say to you, Patsy, is that I think that whole idea of microchipping of pets has wider purchase. I mean, in relation to dogs, we know the requirement is there. I know that, for example, even in forthcoming European provision, that's something that's being actively suggested, is that there would be a requirement to microchip of cats. So, like, I don't think it's central to the bill or the Act and the LCM, but it's obviously, you raise a valid point as to how do you identify if a cat is actually stolen.
Aye. And just, is there any is there any expansion as to what a person takes or detains a cat or dog without lawful authority? I understand that bit. Or reasonable excuse? Is there any expansion as to what reasonable excuse might be?
Again, I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I looked at in this
That's
you know,
okay, you can ask for it. That's all right.
Okay.
That's the department, yeah.
All right, Patsy.
Thanks, Mark.
Anya.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mark, for briefing us this morning. Just in relation to your last point and the comments made by the Chair, obviously this bill, the abduction bill, from my reading of it, isn't as robust as the current theft legislation that's in place. Your reading of it, Mark, would there be an opportunity at all for us to actually amend the existing theft legislation at all? No.
I think you're crossing into another area, I suppose, of another portfolio. It's a justice matter, I suppose, in that regard, Anya. It's the definition of property, I suppose, is broad. I mean, I did look at, I mean, I have that. I can share with you, I mean, from the 1969 Theft Act, if you're happy, I can read just a couple of... Property includes money and all other property, real or personal, including things in action and other intangible property. You know, so there's quite a bit that's covered there, which is a reason, as I said, that equally, I mean, I thought the one's quite significant. Wild creatures, tamed or untamed, shall be regarded as property.
That's pretty wide ranging.
No, so there's again.
Pet hedgehog.
I think my reading of the bill is obviously that it's to set aside or to distinguish between pets as property and pets as actual beings, and I can
Yes.
totally understand that,
Yes.
you know, that's what the bill
Right.
is trying to do. But when it comes down to sentencing, the fact that courts will have the power to actually sentence additional time for theft rather than abduction of a pet is concerning, and obviously it has to be as robust as possible. And just on the cat's point, leading on from Patsy's comments, Mark, cats and microchipping. If a cat is not microchipped, how would you go about proving the act of abduction? Or
Yes, I think that the burden of proof question is one that, I mean, I did skip, but I did look on. I think your broader point, Anya, in relation to the whole concept of, yes, a lower apparent sentence. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I think there is maybe a bit more clarity required on as to the way this approach was advocated. In terms of the passage through Westminster, that issue didn't come up as extensively as I would have assumed. I think the distinction, I suppose, was drawn at, yes, these are counted as property under the law at present, but I suppose the reality was made by numerous MPs was the emotional attachment to pets meant that these were distinct from other forms of property, which was the motivation behind, I suppose, the separate offence and the separate effective piece of legislation. So look, I suppose that remains to be seen around the validity of that. I suppose all I'm doing is flagging the fact that pets at the minute can be counted as property.
John.
Thanks, Chair. Before I ask a question, I'm going to make a couple of comments, and Mark can either respond to them or not. I don't mind, but I think it should be said today that, first of all, even in the worst forms of animal cruelty, maximum sentences or anything close to that are not used in general in Northern Ireland in relation to acts of crimes against pets. And I met with the USPCA, the Lady Chief Justice's sentencing panel in the recent past on that issue. So it would be no surprise, therefore, that sentences are not often handed down in relation to theft either, at least not serious sentences. The second one is the point I'm going to make is the issue of microchipping. Animal welfare charities are largely very supportive of that to proceed. The department isn't in a position currently, because I know this because I've asked the question, to legislate on that, but it's one to keep on the to-do list, as it were. The question, Mark, I think the answer to this, if I'm honest, is already in the briefing, but for the record, I'm going to ask this question. The situation is in relation to this pet abduction bill, that the animal welfare charities are very supportive of this, because they believe that the pet abduction should be specified and determined as an individual offence. Isn't that the case?
I think yes, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
And I mean the 3 UK-wide ones, yes, were very supportive. I said where I struggled, I suppose, John, was the more localised. But I mean, I think even in your pack, obviously that has expanded. At the time I had written the paper, I just had to go what was in the public commentary. Just in relation, I had thought of another issue just in relation to the specific question around convictions and offences. I think that's a very good question. It's one we didn't have time to look at as to how many instances, for example, where a dog or a cat was stolen under the existing law. Did that result in the maximum custodial sentence? I didn't simply have the time to conduct a search on that, but I think that's a very valid question. And I suppose if you are seeing consistently that isn't the case, because it's up to a maximum of 10 years, if we're not getting anywhere near that, well then I suppose the rationale for a separate bill, a separate offence, and a separate sentencing structure becomes maybe stronger. I suppose our purpose was just to highlight the discrepancy, not to make a judgment on it.
So, thank you.
Taken. All right, John. Any other comment or questions? No. All right, Mark, thank you very much. Very helpful, that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, members, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is a briefing from the department officials. Could come forward. Refer you to pages 29 to 53 in your pack. Clerk's memo at 29 to 30, covering letter regarding the pet abduction legislative consent memorandum is at page 31. The legislative consent memorandum is at pages 32 to 35. The pet abduction bill is at pages 36 to 42, and the explanatory notes of the bill is at pages 43 to 53. Okay, welcome. I think it's Christopher Andrews and Darren Fullerton. Is that right?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yep.
Okay, you're both very welcome. So
you.
over to you. You heard some of the queries there, so maybe you can address them as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll probably begin, Chair, by giving you a bit of contextual background and a bit of detail on the bill itself, as well as sort of touching on the process and the consultation. Apologies in advance, Chair, if some of it actually does cut across what you've already heard from the research officials. But I think it's probably important that we can provide a bit of the sort of context from the department's point of view and from working across with officials in DEFRA. Again, look, as you may or may not be aware, the origins of this is a pet abduction offence was originally mooted and included in a Westminster bill called the Animal Welfare Kept Animals Bill, and that followed a recommendation on the matter from the Pet Task Force, which the UK government had set up to basically sort of address and take forward concerns about the rise of pet theft during the COVID-19 pandemic. That bill, Chair, was later withdrawn due to it running out of time in Parliament. The UK government acknowledged the sort of the depth and the strength of feeling around pet theft and pet abduction as an issue, and is now supporting a private members bill which will create, as you are aware, a specific fence around the abduction of cats and dogs. We in DERA have worked alongside Departmental Solicitor's Office, our DEFRA colleagues and the Department of Justice to ensure that the Northern Ireland provisions will and have been appropriately drafted. And as we sort of note and acknowledge, this is normally a devolved matter, and inclusion of these provisions in this bill will require the support of this Assembly in the form of a legislative consent motion. And by doing so, I guess we as officials are acknowledging that it would normally be the competence of this Assembly to cater for this particular matter, but it would be important to note that this would normally be dealt with as an Assembly Act, and it would take much longer if we were to do this ourselves than to be part of this particular process. By starting from scratch, really, we would be absorbing scant departmental resources, which would be better used to advance other animal welfare measures. Again, noting from your initial briefing, the bill itself is short. It contains a limited number of clauses. However, this would not make the passage of a bill any speedier through the Northern Ireland Assembly. It would be required to complete all the designated steps in that particular process in full. So I guess, Chair, consequently, it's our assessment really it would take at least 1 to 2 years before we would have equivalent legislation in place in Northern Ireland, which would match those provisions that they are advocating for England. Therefore, in our view, an LCM is considered to be the most timely, reasonable and proportionate way forward in the current circumstances. Again, I think it's also appropriate that we as officials acknowledge the issue of consultation, and specifically consultation and engagement in Northern Ireland. Again, due to the extremely tight legislative pressures, you've heard already that the bill was introduced in December 2023. It has not left the Department with a great deal of time to carry out standalone public consultation here in Northern Ireland. That said, there has not been a formal public consultation process in the UK. But again, as you've already heard, there has been specific engagement with the likes of the Kennel Club and third sector organisations as part of the work of the Pet Task Force. Again, I know I'm repeating what you've already heard, Chair, but several welfare and companion animal organisations are very positive about the direction and impact of this bill. And when it completed report stage in the House of Commons, it was broadly welcomed by everybody in that particular sector. And again, I think it would be strong to point out that, or appropriate to point out, that there's strong support in the media and across social media platforms for the provisions in the bill. And as officials, we expect this piece of legislation to be universally popular, as it is noted that theft of a pet can be a very emotive issue. At this stage, Chair, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Darren, who will take you through some of the specifics of the bill itself.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Just in terms of the bill itself, the legislation, it creates specific offences for the abduction of dogs and cats, basically to recognise that pet animals are not mere property, but are sentient beings. The intention is to allow courts then to place a greater focus on the impact on the welfare of the animal, as well as the interests of the owner when deciding penalties, rather than a financial loss, which for some animals might be quite low. So the bill, it makes it an offence for a dog or a cat to be taken from a person with lawful control of the animal. In the case of dogs, the bill makes it an offence to detain a dog. It limits the offence to taking cats to account for the different lifestyles of those animals. The bill, the intention is to deal with unscrupulous people who abduct a dog or a cat. It is not intended to criminalise genuinely kind behaviour to cats and dogs that people do not own, for instance, where they believe the animal is astray. It also includes an enabling power to enable the Department to extend the offences to other species of pet, but this power is limited. The Department must consider that the animals of that species are kept as a pet, and there must be evidence of a significant number or rise in cases of unlawful taking or detaining of those animals. The bill also seeks to enhance criminal justice data reporting and monitoring of pet abduction cases, and that will help us better understand and tackle the issue. So if the bill does receive royal assent, the provisions to create the new pet abduction offence in Northern Ireland would not come into force until the introduction of a commencement order by the Department. In terms of the penalties then, as is covered earlier, but the maximum sentence attached to a cat or dog abduction is up to 5 years in prison or a fine or both. And as this was covered earlier also, the maximum penalty that aligns with other serious animal welfare offences under the Welfare of Animals Northern Ireland Act. And just for context, child abduction, the maximum penalty for child abduction in Northern Ireland is 7 years. There are a number of safeguards and exemptions which are set out in the bill. It does not seek to criminalise cases involving domestic disputes between partners. Therefore, no offence is committed where a dog is taken or detained from a household where the dog had entered that household after the two people had started living together. It's also a defence for a person to show that they had lawful authority to take or detain the dog. For example, that covers the likes of vets or dog sitters. And there's also a defence in relation to unaccompanied or stray dogs, such as a person charged with an offence could show that they had complied with current notification requirements under the Dogs Northern Ireland Order 1983 and made reasonable steps to comply with the requirements for collection of the dog. And finally, there's a fallback defence of reasonable excuse, and that is to ensure the treatment on a case-by-case basis and to ensure that we don't inadvertently criminalise well-meaning behaviour. In terms of progress of the bill through Parliament, it was introduced in the Commons by Anna Firth MP on the 6th of December. It's successfully completed report stage in the Commons on the 19th of April and has now progressed to the Lords. It's scheduled for second reading in the Lords tomorrow, the 10th of May. And it's expected then it will move on to committee stage if that's required in early June. So thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions the members may have.
Just confirm that time scale again right at the end there that you mentioned, sorry, for bringing it through committee stage.
It's in the House of Lords, it's second reading tomorrow, the 10th of May, and then it's expected to move to committee stage if that's needed in the House of Lords in early June, and be hopefully made then.
I ask on the back of that, why then there's an LCM coming here before it's actually through? I thought it would be further advanced before we'd...
No, it'd be normal process to provide the LCM before the bill would actually reach the Lords stage.
Okay.
In this situation, given that the bill was progressing so quickly, and given that it is a PMB, a private members bill, they don't have as many sittings really to consider them, so there was a risk then that it could run out of time if they delayed it until we provided the LCM.
Okay, and an LCM can't be brought forward after a bill is into an act, can it?
Normally it would be provided before, because then if we didn't then provide consent and the bill was enacted, well then basically it would cause difficulties.
It could be, but it doesn't normally. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think
I
I don't think it'd be normal practice. I think you would have to be able to provide consent beforehand.
Okay.
Chair, Northern Ireland potentially wouldn't be in the Act then.
Yeah. The issue around no formal public consultation, is that normal, even for a private member's bill?
It's not normal, Chair. I think it really is a factor of the origins and sort of passage of this particular piece of legislation. Is because it came out of that kept animals bill. It was separated out of that, and it became a private members bill. And then that private members bill, as Darren has commented, has picked up and moved quite rapidly. I would absolutely, totally agree. In normal circumstances, there should be public-wide consultation. But I think, whilst there's no defence, I would stress that we are conscious and we are very aware that across the third sector organisations, animal welfare charities, and amongst the general public and generally the mood in the media is very supportive of this piece of legislation. It's not particularly seen as a controversial piece of legislation, and it was, I guess, it grown out of that need to deal with pet theft and pet abduction as a specific offence because of the spotlight shown on it during the pandemic.
And the issue that we raised with the researcher, you'll have heard around the more lenient sentencing than there is within the justice legislation around property theft.
Yes, well, because this new offence is considering basically the impact on the welfare of the animal, it aligns then with our current animal welfare offences under the Welfare of Animals Act, and that the maximum under that is 5 years. So it seemed appropriate then that considering this is this new offence is a welfare issue, that it would be better to align with that.
Okay.
Just to provide a bit more context around that, I think when DEFRA officials were looking at the clauses and how the bill would be constructed, it was sort of really sort of signalled as a welfare measure rather than necessarily an abduction or a pet offence, on the basis that when animals are abducted, it can result in their welfare being compromised because the individuals that are abducting the animals may not have their best interests at heart. They may be abducting those animals to try and sort of resell them on. They may be abducting those animals to breed from them if they are pedigree cats or dogs, or I think as touched on in a previous or earlier question, they may be abducting those animals to use for other reasons, for example, facilitating fighting or issues like that.
Okay, take your point on that actually. Are we aware, or are you aware, probably maybe not as an issue for the police I suppose, but Are you aware of many convictions in relation to the theft of pets under the property legislation?
This is a bit of a chicken and an egg situation, Chair, and I think as your previous sort of briefing noted, as pet abduction is not stated or not called out as a specific offence under the Theft Act, we are at the sort of the mercy of how this information is recorded by the PSNI. So there is no sort of universal requirement to identify or record in official statistics that a pet has been involved in a theft or a robbery or a burglary. Again, as your researchers noted, the only available statistical evidence for Northern Ireland has come out of freedom of information requests, and there has been noted that there has been, I think your researcher said, running about 35 a year. The freedom of information requests that we've noted from the PSNI suggested around the same, with a slight uptick during the pandemic. And I think one of the freedom of information requests noted as well that in 2 financial years, for example, only 2 pets had been recovered as a result out of those recorded thefts or abductions.
Okay, Patsy?
Thanks very much, and you probably got a flavour of where I'm going to go earlier. But first and foremost, police, have you engaged with police as a consultee just to see have they the resources to follow through on this?
We've engaged primarily with the Department of Justice.
Right.
And we have good relations with the police, but I don't think we've actually sort of spoken directly to the PSNI.
I think it might need to be a consultee just as a word of advice to you there. Now, of course, it's a laudable enough bill, and the principles of it, I think, nobody could disagree with. But back to that question, how the police officer going out and somebody says, "My black cat," somebody's taken my black cat. Now, that's the situation that's going to happen. So, how or in what way does the legislation envisage a police officer pursuing an investigation to identify a black cat?
So we can kind of join that question, your previous question together. There will be no additional burden on the PSNI because they would have already had the responsibility for investigating theft. So calling this out as a separate offence doesn't create an additional investigatory burden on the PSNI. And then on your second point, it is the Department's advice and guidance to all cat owners that they get microchipped. That is in our code of practice for cat owners. We heavily recommend that. It is not as yet a mandatory requirement for cats to be microchipped in Northern Ireland, and it is only becoming a mandatory requirement in England from the 10th of June. Mandatory microchipping of cats is something that the Minister has indicated that he is willing to look at, and I think as officials we are very keen to see how it plays out in England before we consider measures here. And if it supported a measure like this, then that could be a useful piece of evidence to advance the cause of cat microchipping.
I think you made a fun with that one, but anyway, that's just my observation from now. Then back to the issue of the person having reasonable excuse to detain or have the animal in their possession, and I saw you outlined a few of those, or one or two of them. So rural area, right? Dogs worrying sheep. In that situation, those can become quite contentious issues, because I've seen situations where the owner of the dog, no, that couldn't be my dog, did that. The farmer has witnessed it, and the dog may still be alive. So if in that situation a farmer, say, has corralled the dog or taken the dog into his possession pending the arrival of a dog warden or something else, how do you envisage that panning out? Because these are the sorts of really live situations that you could enter into, especially if police are then called and say, "Hi, your man, that farmer up the road, has my dog inside there." And I'm just trying to work these through the real life situations that the legislation, it may have unintended consequences, but those are the sorts of things that could wind up in court and could make the headlines of the paper.
I'll start and then I'll hand over to Darren. There's specific requirements in the 1983 Dogs Order to deal with dog worrying, and there are specific provisions allowing a farmer to do certain things to dogs which he where they have actually worried livestock, or he believes that they are about to worry livestock. So we could probably write to you and sort of set out what those are, but Darren, if you want to sort of pick up on the other aspects.
Like the bill itself, it does cover that specific defence in relation to finding an unaccompanied dog or a dog that you believe is to be a stray. So as long as you have complied with the requirements under the dogs order to actually report it to the police or the district council within 24 hours and made then the dog available for them to collect it, that is a defence that you won't be accused of abducting that dog.
Right. So, say the other person, the owner of the dog, invokes the other legislation which we're talking about now. What sort of a situation does that leave it to the police to make a call on it?
My view would be that the dogs order would have primacy there, and that the individual will be in their rights.
Okay.
To deal, so it would have to be dealt with, I believe, as sort of two separate issues. Firstly, the livestock worrying issue that would need to be dealt with and cleared off the decks, yes. and then the PSNI would be brought in to determine whether or not actually there was an abduction offence.
Okay, thank you. And let me see now. The issue of consultation, just back to that targeted consultation. I think probably you need to have some more beefed up words with the police.
Would totally agree, and I think that's a fair point. The other issue is, and then sort of Darren may wish to sort of elaborate more, is prior to the commencement order taking effect, we would intend to engage with all significant key stakeholders around the provisions in this particular bill. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Patsy. Anya?
Thank you, Chair. Just off the back of Patsy's comments, he stole me thunder about the cats and microchipping, so we did. So I just moved quickly on to a resource issue, and I noted in I think it was the clerk's papers, that the Welsh Government had looked to actually extend the LCM over there, and had noted that they were unable to do so due to resource pressures. From your own point of view, do you know exactly what those resource pressures were? Because I'm assuming they were looking to take it through as an LCM just like we have done.
It was resource pressures in terms of the actual process of gaining the LCM, because I think it was there was only a single member of staff there and they were involved in other LCMs, so they hadn't the capacity to take on this one as well. But that doesn't stop them at a later date taking forward this legislation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? No? Oh, William, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And touching on what Patsy said, in around sheep, I had one constituent on last week, or 3 constituents on, 3 farmers. Sheep killed at each farm. They knew who the dogs were. They went to the police. Legislation's all very fine. It's the interpretation of legislation. And who's, most people's very good at sidestepping legislation. I didn't steal that dog come to me. I felt sorry for it to took it in. It's very difficult to nail the thing down tight. I can see issues. Legislation for the sake of legislation's not that good a thing either, unless it's meaningful and works.
Well, I appreciate that point. I take your point around dogs, but it is the law in Northern Ireland to have your dog both microchipped and licensed, and the two must go hand in hand. So where a person has a dog in their possession, that dog should be microchipped, it should be licensed, and the ownership details of that dog should be recorded on the licence, and that should correlate with the information on the microchip. So there is already a safeguard and a piece of legislation there, and it would be up to the local council to investigate any issues around non-licensing or where microchips are missing.
I understand that, yeah, but the people concerned had some difficulty now getting someone to act. I know that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right, Michelle.
Thank you. And just very briefly, with regards to the microchipping of cats, can you give some clarity as to why the department isn't bringing forward a piece of legislation in response to this request around microchipping of cats?
So this is probably I touched on earlier. The only part of the UK that has decided to microchip cats and make that a compulsory measure at the minute is England. Those regulations came into force, the 16th of May. I've lost my dates, and the legislation itself then, or the onus that places on cats owners, comes into force on the 10th of June. Ministers aware of that, and we as officials have sort of indicated that it would be useful to see how that legislation plays out first in England, and to see what benefits and particularly welfare enhancements it maybe brings to cat ownership before we would explore something similar here. But I am very conscious that Cats Protection have written to the Minister a number of times and met with officials to strongly advocate mandatory cat microchipping in Northern Ireland. And again, it is set out in our DAERA Code of Practice for cats that cat owners should microchip their cats, albeit that's just guidance. It doesn't place a statutory obligation on them to do so.
And then the information that we have in our packs from the welfare charities have highlighted the issue of not having a single national database, and obviously that's problematic. And I suppose the fact that there's only a sort of short piece of water between ourselves and the mainland makes it probably quite easy then to be able to sort of transport small pets. Is there any representation being made by the department here in response to those concerns?
Yes, I think it's important to note that DEFRA have recently published a consultation response on microchipping reforms for cats and dogs. One of the issues raised in that microchipping response is the prospect of a single database. And DEFRA officials have indicated that that's sort of single point of access. It shouldn't say single database. It will be a single point of access, which would basically sit as an interface over all the existing microchipping databases. That could be extended to include Northern Ireland. That is something we're keen to explore, because you're right to say that there is no requirement in Northern Ireland for pet owners to use a single database. In reality, the database that your microchip ends up getting registered to probably depends on who microchips the pet in the first place, and there are a number of different databases in use in Northern Ireland. So looking at that single point of access and see if it could be extended to Northern Ireland, that would be something we'd be interested in, because I think it would confer really obvious benefits.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. No other questions. Very interesting, so appreciate that. And we'll obviously be doing a report of which all the information will be recorded. But thank you for your time and presentation. Okay, members, later in the meeting we will consider a draft report on the LCM, but for now we'll move on to agenda item 7. Agenda item 7 is the department briefing. Update on the Northern Ireland Food and Animal Information System NIFAIS project. Refer you to pages 55 to 58 regarding further information from the department on the update on the project. You will note that NIFAIS is the IT project being delivered to replace the current Animal Public Health Information Service, which was known as APHIS. Department's paper includes a table of the activity of the new system from the 4th of September 2023 to the 4th of April 2024. From the department's paper, it states the launch has been successful, but note there is further work to do to ensure ready for APHIS switch off on June 2025. Next steps include this committee being updated around the key milestones of the project, plus a further gateway assessment is scheduled prior to stage 2 going live to provide assurance that the project is ready for the next key milestones. All right, gentlemen, you're all very welcome. Brian Doherty, Nigel Trimble and Paul McGornahan. You're all very welcome here, and I'll leave it over to you to whoever's leading.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. So good morning. Firstly, can I thank the committee for the opportunity today to provide an overview of the Northern Ireland Food Animal Information System, or NIFAIS as we know it, following on from my group update to the committee in February of this year. I am the senior responsible owner for the NIFAIS project, and today joined by, as you've already noted, Chair, Nigel Trimble, who is the NIFAIS project director, and Paul McGurnahan, who is DAERA's Director of Digital Services. Chair, I believe it would be useful to start with an update on progress since I last appeared before the committee in late 2021, although I appreciate this was under a previous mandate. At that time, DAERA had just completed a gateway assessment around a new approach to delivery of the NIFAIS project following significant delays. This followed on from an options analysis completed by the Strategic Investment Board and business case addendum approved by the Department of Finance in early 2021. That addendum agreed the best way forward as to continue with the current supplier Capita, but under a different approach. This new approach was governed by a project charter jointly agreed by DAERA and Capita and led to what we call NIFAIS Stage 1 going live on the 3rd of September last year. This took all bovine functionality from the legacy system, APHIS, and moved it across to NIFAIS. This is roughly 70% of APHIS functionality and removed a large risk to the agri-food sector of APHIS failure at any point prior to its decommissioning in 2025. Members will be aware that APHIS has been a key component of DAERA and the wider agri-food industry since it launched in the late 1990s. It has underpinned so much of what we do, and replacing it was always going to be a challenging journey, as the NIFAIS project has proved. However, APHIS has to be replaced for both legal and technological reasons, and moving to NIFAIS provides us with a range of benefits, including easier integration with other DAERA systems and increased security available on a more modern IT platform. As part of the new agreed approach to NIFAIS delivery, a big bang delivery meant we put all cattle functionality live at the same time. This was a highly complex process and involved a wide range of stakeholders, including markets and meat plants, as well as all internal users. To support users, we and Capita jointly deployed staff in a hypercare setting where support was available at all times to help users with any issues that arose. One of the main aims of the project team was to ensure that the wider industry continued to function during the switchover. Stage 1 launch necessitated a short enforced delay to TB testing on farms to facilitate migration of data from APHIS to NIFAIS. This migration of data on the 2nd of September 2023 involved cleansing data on APHIS, migrating to a staging database and then transforming it for NIFAIS loading. Around 300 million pieces of data were reconciled, and this included data for all living bovine animals plus a record of parentage and for those that died or were exported in recent years. Despite NIFAIS initially having performance issues which impacted all users, there were no markets or meat plants closed throughout this period, and it would be remiss of me not to note the excellent working relationship the project team has with these users. It was a truly collaborative effort to get external systems for NIFAIS introduction, and where extra time or support was requested, this was granted to ensure all were ready to go at the launch. One of the main complaints from farm businesses after launch was that some users no longer had access to all herds they previously seen on APHIS. This was a change made for data privacy reasons and was not linked to NIFAIS software. The change was communicated to all farmers in advance of go live, both in letter and press release, but was missed by some given the feedback received. Farmers or agents were advised to sort access permissions through their own local DAERA offices, and this happened over the following weeks. Engagement with all user groups continued to deliver required enhancements or fixes, while at the same time, the project team is now very focused on Stage 2 delivery. Stage 2 will remove the remaining non-bovine functionality from APHIS, and this is scheduled to go live on NIFAIS prior to June 2025, when APHIS will be switched off. You will note from your briefing some of the numbers that NIFAIS processes. As well as being a traceability system, it delivers disease control and public health functions. This includes the bovine TB programme and testing through to evaluation, post-mortem and compensation approvals. It is truly a 24/7 system reflecting the needs of both DAERA and the agri-food sector. Members will be aware that nothing stands still for long, and NIFAIS Stage 1 is already being changed to facilitate tag format changes, as well as delivering data for the new future agricultural support schemes. However, unless further changes are statutory, They are being left until Stage 2 is delivered to minimise the risk of project slippage past the June 2025 Stage 2 go-live date. I hope, Chair, that's been helpful, and along with Nigel and Paul, we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the information and for the update. Just a couple of questions from myself. What is the AFIS system then currently used for? If we still have the two live, what's it used for? Because as a farmer I can't access it.
So I'll answer that, Chair. So it's used for non-bovine, so for sheep, goats, pigs, other species.
Okay. And can the farmers that have sheep and pigs, they can still access it?
So the farmer portal, the farmer logs into NIFAIS, and then in the background, NIFAIS goes to AFIS to get sheep data back. So the farmer only sees one system, but AFIS is providing the data in the background. So all movements in the sheep markets or in the sheep abattoirs are all processed on AFIS still until next year.
And explain to me a bit further, because you did brush over it quite quickly, why AFIS had to be replaced.
So AFIS came into existence in the late 1990s, 1998 to be exact. So it's been a system that has served us well.
Yeah, but the Ford cars came in a lot earlier and they were still modified and upgraded.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I suppose in some ways that's what we're doing. So AFIS as a system, I suppose, was off its time, but there's been some significant technological changes and also some legal changes. And the contract is due to come to an end. And we needed to have a system, which NIFAIS will do, to integrate with other IT systems that we have across the department. And as we've moved more and more into a digital-only environment, it was important that we had a replacement system. And that's what NIFAIS will do.
And explain then, Brian, why AFIS couldn't have been adopted or upgraded. Like, was it due to cost? Was it due to the system just not being able to cope? Or I'm just trying to figure out why it couldn't have been upgraded as opposed to an entirely new system that took years and millions of pounds.
Yeah, so in part it's to do with operating environments that we were using at the time. And NIFAIS provided us with an opportunity, as I say, to integrate with other IT systems that AFIS just couldn't do. And the cost, we believed anyway, the cost of bringing in a new system far outweighed the continuing maintenance or any enhancements that we would have made within AFIS.
I'm assuming there was an options appraisal done at that stage, was there, to test
there was
that?
And there was also a business case for NIFAIS, which also had to reflect the options appraisal. When one of the options would have been to do nothing and remain with AFIS, another would have been to enhance it, and then there would have been other options which ultimately included introducing a new system, NIFAIS, which was the preferred option.
Can we get a summary of that options appraisal then, just to see? Because I'm always conscious to think, look, sometimes it's bound to be easier just to upgrade what you have, and maybe, but probably from what you're saying, Brian, that wasn't possible or practical. So I'd like to see the reasons, the options appraisal behind that, to establish just why that had to be done. Be useful.
Yeah, we can.
I can help, Chair, if you don't mind. So one of the main drivers was public procurement law. So AFIS had to be replaced, okay, because it was with an external supplier, and it had gone on for so long that the new public procurement legislation came in, and it had to be replaced. So DAERA had no option to upgrade AFIS and keep going. But we would certainly provide that options analysis to you.
But when you say, Nigel, upgrade AFIS, that makes it sound as if there was an option to upgrade the AFIS instead of a whole new system.
Not a legal option. So we'll have to comply with the law.
There had to be new procurement that was done. To comply with the procurement legislation. There had to be new competition because the contract was originally awarded was extended past its dates by 2 times, I think, and the advice from CPD at that stage that it was open to a legal challenge and there needed to be a replacement competition.
Okay. There was a significant report carried out by the Auditor Controller General. What's your comments around that, particularly in relation to the cost and the length of time and overrun of building the new system?
So I suppose, firstly, we welcome the Audit Office report. Whilst it did, as you say, Chair, pick up on issues around cost and overrun, it also did recognise that the Department had made some changes, which in part came out of a gateway review in 2019, and that included things like better engagement and collaboration with the supplier, Capita, a change in leadership within the project team, and some enhancements in skills. Clearly, the cost, the NIFAIS should have been live and running from 2018 onwards, but there were undoubtedly challenges leading up to that. Now, stage 1.1 actually went live in 2017, so part of it. But we accept the observations of the NIO, but I think that the fact that we have now got stage 1 in totality live from the 3rd of September or the 4th of September last year, and with a plan to have stage 2 going live now in June of next year, we've been able to make progress, but we do accept the criticisms and the observations of the Audit Office.
So all the delays, had the DAERA to pick up all the cost of those delays and extra money, or was there any built-in clauses that allowed you to reclaim some of the extra funding or work that was developed by the developer of the system, as opposed to DAERA having to pick up all the costs of that?
So I don't think we can lay this at the feet of Capita, if I'm being perfectly honest, and it was a company called AMT Cybex prior to Capita. I think the delays, it would be fair to say, probably lay with DAERA, if I'm being honest, around the contract management approach that was taken, which was quite rigid. And also, when you look at the way the software is developed, it was developed in what's known as a waterfall approach. And waterfall is where, excuse me, you take particular specifications, the supplier does the software, then it's passed to us at user acceptance testing, and that caused problems, but that's the way that it was agreed with us. We have now moved it on to what's called an agile approach, and that's where you take sprints. So you're continually developing the system, but we're actually heavily involved in the development rather than waiting to be given a product at the very end. So I think that the better part of this lay with DAERA, if I'm being perfectly honest, rather than the supplier.
Okay, the better part of it or all of
I
it?
suppose I'll come in, Chair. Yeah, so not all of it. And to answer your question, without going into commercial sensitivities, it's a model government services contract. So yes, there are delay payments built into that contract, and where the supplier was found at fault, those delay payments are invoked by DAERA and have been.
So there were delay payments invoked?
Yes. Yeah.
Would they have been substantial?
Yes, yes, and they were the maximum that the contract allows. Yeah, and it was a model government services contract.
Okay. So the overrun of time and the overspend of money was broadly DAERA's fault?
We probably could have managed the contract in a different way, which would have allowed us to make progress within the timeline, but that didn't happen, and that was picked up in the Gateway Review and also in the observations from the Audit Office.
Finally, for me, future-proofing. Obviously, I do take your point around the potential challenge of the old NIFAIS system because it was so long there. How is this future-proofed so that we don't have another system to build in another 4 years maybe that's going to cost similar and take as long to do? Have we future-proofed this system that we can build in?
Well, one of the big
adoptions
differences
or
on this contract is the ownership of the IPR.
So what, sorry, I missed that.
The IPR, ownership of the IPR.
Uh-huh.
So that the original contract, the IPR resided with the supplier, and the NIFAIS contract, the IPR rests with the department. So we can take that system and develop it in-house if there were problems, or appoint another contractor to be able to continue to develop that system. That's the big difference between AFIS and NIFAIS. And Brian already alluded to how the technology has been built on a much more modern platform that allows extension of that and interfaces to other systems. So it's much easier to integrate into other departmental line of business systems or to external stakeholder systems than AFIS was ever able to do.
We can be confident that in another 4 years' time, we're not going to embark upon another system, go to contract or go to tender for it, and it may cost another 100 million.
Yeah, if we needed to go to the market again, then we have the options of different suppliers coming in and building on top of NIFAIS rather than having to replace it as we did with APHIS.
All right, thanks. Patsy?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. One thing you mind us, Brian, just see here at paragraph 6 and 7 of the reference is nearly 2020 to protect public expenditure, and again paragraph 7 refers to public expenditure as well and financial concerns. By this stage, obviously, you had hit crisis point financially. How much was the contract for? And by this stage, whenever it had hit some sort of, well, I don't know, over expenditure or whatever was going on, how much had been spent by that stage?
So the overall contract, so the overall cost, business case cost, is around about £49 million.
The business case cost back on whenever on the 21st of April 2016, that's the one I'm referring to.
Yeah, so the business case, we did an addendum to the business case during 2020, which the strategic...
No, sorry, Brian. I'm back to 2016, whenever the department signed a contract with the supplier.
Yeah.
Now, clearly at that stage, you sign a contract, there's a price involved. It's that price, if you don't have it at the minute, it doesn't matter, we can get it, you can send it in. It's that price, and then clearly there was something going very wrong round about 2020 with the finances and how much it had overspent by that stage.
So in terms of the supplier, it's a fixed price contract. So
yes.
And so that's what it was.
No, but if you don't have the details in that, you can provide me with the details. In other words, how much was the fixed contract assigned with the firm back in April 2016, and how much was it overspent?
So I'll answer, Patsy. So the initial contract value is 8.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's what was signed back in 2016. And obviously, with any IT contract, there's optimism bias built into that. So that has the potential to increase by up to 31%. The final optimism bias for NIFAIS was 31%. Okay, and that's to allow for changes and things. And at the time we last came to the committee, which was in 2021, okay, at that time the supplier had been paid 715 or 750, can't remember the exact figure, 1,000. Okay, so that's all had been paid at that time, which relates to your question.
So what was the concern about protecting the public expenditure then?
Well, with the length of time, so that's the supplier cost. As Brian said, the supplier contract is a fixed capital cost, and that still hasn't changed.
So by that stage, only £700,000 had been paid in total about this project.
Yeah, because the supplier only gets paid on delivery of key milestones. So obviously the fact that the project had been delayed, they'd only met one key milestone, so they'd only been paid for that.
There wasn't any overspend by that stage?
Not to the supplier, no. But obviously DERA
has
costs.
Overspend to anyone else then?
Well, DERA, obviously there's costs to DERA of the project team, which were anticipated at the start to be in place for a number of years and are now in place over a longer period.
It would be helpful if we had those at some stage. I don't expect you to have them today. Now, then you raised an interesting thing which really intrigued me, was the absence of involvement of DERA in the development of a project, which is pretty integral to the function of DERA. Why wasn't that happening?
Well, we were involved in the development in the sense the way the process works is that we as a department or our users set the specifications of what they want in a system. That would have largely been driven through our veterinary service colleagues because they're the senior user of the system. So they would have been providing us with the specifications. That would have been then passed to the supplier and their software developers, and they would have developed along that specification. And that's how the process still works today.
But as you referred to, the absence or maybe the diminution of the involvement of DERA throughout the process.
No, so that's what going back to this waterfall approach, which is
intrigued by your analogies, but anyway.
No, DERA are heavily involved.
Heavily involved.
That's a misconception. Yeah, heavily involved. What Brian referred to was, DERA agrees, works with the supplier up to a point to agree what we call a functional specification. That then went off, as Brian said, under the waterfall approach. That went off to be developed, and when it came back, there were issues with it. Whereas now we have a much more agile approach, we call it. So we see the functionality being developed all the time, and changes or fixes can be identified, more readily. So it's just a new approach to delivery.
No rocks at the bottom of the waterfall then, no? So can I ask just what, and finally, Chair, the anticipated overall cost, presumably you have some sort of projections there now as to what this is going to ultimately cost?
Well, with a business case cost, which we remain on track, so that overall cost for the business case is £49 million, which includes all costs. It's not just those costs associated with the supplier capita. It would include costs that for the project team and anybody else who's involved, and it's over the lifespan through to 2035.
Just, I might be a wee bit slow today, but has this then increased from 8.7 million to 49 million?
No, so the £8.7 million was the cost for the supplier.
Okay.
And as Nigel's alluded to, there then is the optimism bias that there would be of 30% in the business case. But the way our business cases work is you look at overall cost, so it includes our staff cost.
Okay.
And that'll be through for the lifetime of the project, which takes you through to 2035-36. So that's every cost associated with the project.
And NIFAIS as well. That's NIFAIS as well. It's not just the NIFAIS.
Was that the anticipated cost back in 2016? 49 million.
The initial business case figure was, as is called out in the audit office report that the chairs referred to, was 58 million, and then there's about they're forecasting a 10% increase on that, due to the delays. So that's all specified in their report.
Okay.
But that's as Brian says, that's a business case cost. It's not a supplier cost.
Oh, no.
And includes both systems, NIFAIS and NIFAIS.
Yeah, and all's working well then now.
Well, stage one, as Brian alluded to, stage one has gone live. I say it's been a busy 8 months. I can't remember the number of months now, but it's been a busy time, throughout Hypercare. But successful. Still work to do. We still have issues. But I say on the project team, we're now heavily focused on both supporting that stage one cattle stuff, but also stage two delivery, which is all the rest.
Are the issues anything we need to know about?
Well,
no major issues. No, the industry's working. There are figures in your pack for the numbers of animals moving through markets and abattoirs every week, and
I should have asked directly. Can you give us a flavour of what the issues are then?
Issues are user. I say that the main issue since we went live was performance. Okay, so markets, meat plants, private vets, all had issues with the system was too slow, and that we eventually found the cause for that, and that was fixed, and so that there'd been no complaints about performance for the last number of months. I have to say, industry-wise, things are going very well. A lot of our issues are with internal users. So just making the system more user-friendly for internal users.
All right, okay. That's grand. Thanks very much.
The whole matter of the marts was sorted, was it? Because that seemed to be a hold-up for a period of time, but that's all resolved, is it?
Yeah. Listen, we were meeting the markets, daily and then weekly at the start. And I say while the performance issues were there, it was a big concern, and it was in the media. You'll have seen it in the press, but that the problem was identified and fixed, Tom. So our chair, so there's no issues in the last number of months.
That's okay. Anya?
Thank you, Chair. The current contract's due to end of next year.
The original contract ran for 9 years with the option. So DARE has an option of 2 by 3 year extensions.
How confident is the department at the minute that NIFAIS will be rolled out before or throughout the duration of the original contract? In your opinion, at the minute, will there have to be extensions sought past the end date?
No. So the IFAS contract for IFAS runs out at the end of June 2025. So NIFAIS Stage 2 has to be in before that. Okay, and currently we're on track, because if that's not the case, then we'll have to go potentially back to CPD to seek to extend that IFAS contract again. And as Paul's already alluded to, Veterinary Service has already done that a number of times over the years, so we're very keen to avoid that.
June 25. Thank you.
And IFAS will have been in existence since late 1998. So a very long period of time for an IT system.
Thank you, Chair.
William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. can I say I had, in the early stages there was a lot of complaints, but in fairness, I've heard none this last number of months, the last couple of months, so things must be moving fairly well. In relation to, I see still 70% functionality to move from AFIS to NIFAIS. You think that's doable in the time?
Well, 70% has moved from AFIS onto NIFAIS, so it's the remaining 30% that has to move across. And I think it's just Nigel's alluded to, William, we're on track to have stage 2 up live from June 2025.
You're on track?
Yep.
Good. Well, I welcome that. That's good.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Very interesting, obviously. And look, I'm sure even as a simple farmer, it eases the problems when you can do things online, particularly register animals and transfer animals. It is positive in that sense, and I'm sure within the department itself, it makes it much more easier to manage and facilitate. Can I just ask one final thing, and it mightn't be within your competency to answer it, but a few years ago I seen a report where there were so many animals went missing off the AFIS system. How do animals go missing off the system?
I'll go to Nigel, who's a vet, who used to work in that area.
So animals can go missing if a farmer notifies them as going missing. So that's one way. The other way is if animals just don't turn up at a TB test or an inspection, then obviously there's an investigation into where they've gone. But sometimes the farmer won't know where the animals are gone, and maybe they report them to the police as suspect stolen, or maybe they've just gone missing from the farm.
Okay.
Just one
yes,
issue.
no, sorry.
On the transition from AFIS to NIFAIS, 70% of that has been changed over the run. I'm sure that didn't go without some difficulties and hiccups. Was there any penalty to the farmers because of difficulties that were faced by the transition?
Well, no penalty per se, but clearly there was great frustration among our users, and we worked, as Nigel has said, very closely with all of our stakeholders, including the UFU, who clearly have a significant representation of farm businesses. I think that some of the users maybe had difficulty with the change in the format and the presentation of the new system. It was maybe just not what they were used to, given AFIS has been in existence, as Nigel said, from late 1998. But I think that where those issues occurred and were reported to us, we used our best endeavours to fix those quickly. But I'm not aware of any specific penalties, as maybe you put it, that were incurred by farm businesses. And as I said in my opening remarks, no mart or meat plant had to close during all of that. I would have to say that was not without considerable hard work on the marts and the meat plants part, and indeed along with some farm businesses as well, just to get it right. I would hope that the committee will take some confidence from the fact that we've reflected on everything that has happened, and a lot of lessons for us to learn, particularly around communications as we lead into June 2025. So we've enhanced our capacity and capability in that area, and anything that didn't go well the first time around with the launch of stage 1, we're going to make sure and do our best to make sure it doesn't happen in stage 2.
Might I just add, and not want to sound too critical, that some of your own staff were very disillusioned early in the process, because I had spoke to someone that contacted me in relation to it, because they just couldn't get the system to work properly either. But that can happen. I understand that, but thankfully that is ironed out. But there was issues not only for the farmer but for your own staff.
No, absolutely, and we heard the noise around that. There's no doubt about that. And again, from our users' point of view, and particularly our intern users, as Nigel, again, I alluded to the fact that we continue to work with our internal users. I suppose what's really important is that we want everybody to be able to use the system as best they can and maximise it as best they can. NIFAIS is hugely important to us from a food security point of view in our export markets. So it's really important that we make sure the system works and that all of our users have confidence in it.
Absolutely. Okay.
Just wondering, is what Tom's getting at there, is it there's no suggestion that anybody was penalised the way post office owners or sub-postmasters were penalised due to the computerised system?
No, definitely not. And it's worth just in relation, Chair, to Tom's point. So we worked with the Farmers Union in the run-up to go live, because obviously Brian alluded to there was a short delay to on-farm TB testing, to allow for that kind of complex data migration to take place. So some farmers wouldn't have been able to do their TB test, when they wanted for over a period of 3 weeks. Then we kept reactor tests going, but annual tests and things, there was a potential for delay, which obviously you'll be aware can lead to a penalty if it reaches a certain point. So we worked with the Farmers Union and moved test dates and things for farms in the lead up to go live, so that no farmer, we gave an assurance to the union that no farmer would be penalised, where NIFAIS was the sole factor.
Okay, thanks. I'd say wanted in quick
Just
question.
one brief question. This is more one directed for the entire civil service. The number of times that I've sat in on committees and issues with development of software, computer programs has arisen. I even remember the time whenever we were trying to develop the programme for the transition to planning for local authorities. That went way overspend and stuff. Is there any particular resource, specialist resource that the civil service has to be called in to ensure that these types of issues aren't an occurrence that happens with any sort of regularity or frequency? One that's available, a resource that's available to the civil service within, or even actually without, that you can rely on with confidence to oversee that what you're asking for with public money is in fact delivered and delivered competently.
Maybe just on the wider point, Patsy, I might draw on Paul because he sits on an NICS-wide digital oversight board.
I think probably the best way that is managed is through the gateway process. And it was a gateway process that actually identified the problems whenever they probed at one of the gateway reviews, which led to a pause in the project and an options appraisal, whether to continue with the existing supplier or go back out to the market again. But there is a well-established gateway process that provides a challenge to any project, and it starts at an early stage within the project. There are a series of different gateway reviews that come in.
Well, I get that. I sat in the Public Accounts Committee and I saw how that worked, but a lot of it is, it moves at the pace of the civil service, but it's also kind of after the event. What I'm saying is, a resource which you have to ensure that the people that you're engaging with public funds have the competency, the wherewithal and the capabilities within their organisation to deliver what the ask is.
So there's another project at NIAO we're taking on at the moment, looking at major IT projects which are over 25 million, in a register of all of those and ensuring that there are lessons learnt from each of those projects are fed back into any future development programmes. So there's an early warning system in place that will flag up much earlier if there are problems with development of systems. This one here has been on for quite a while, and as Brian said at the start, the original request or the original specification was for delivery of the system entirely by the external supplier. And then whenever the system was paused, we took a look at it again. The way that had been delivered was not going to deliver the results, just because of the complexity of the system. As we moved to a different process of much closer involvement with DERA technical staff along with the suppliers, and that was a key lesson learnt, and we'll be taking that forward into...
I know it was a key lesson learnt, but the number of times I've heard that phrase, lessons learned, and we heard it during the public inquiry recently about lessons learnt, and still the lessons hadn't been learnt in practice.
And I accept that point, but I think in this case the lessons have been learnt, because the pause was done. There was a red gateway review that the system wasn't going to be delivered, and then within a couple of years it has been turned around and it has been delivered.
Sorry, I don't want to labour this point, but that's when you're into the process. It's sifting out at the very start if the company or companies that you're engaging have the competencies to deliver what you're asking.
Well, I'm assuming CPD would play a significant role.
It's a significant procurement exercise, and this one was done using competitive dialogue, which took a long time. And the assessment at that stage by the panel was that the external supplier was capable of developing that system. And then there was some confidence in that because there was the existing supplier of NIFAIS. It just didn't work out that way in relation to the way that they went about developing the application, and there were some difficulties in the interpretation of the requirements as specified by veterinary service, how that translated through to the supplier, and the length of time that took because of the waterfall approach that had been adopted by the third-party supplier. So at that stage, most IT projects were developed using waterfall methodology. That has now changed, and we are now using a much more agile approach, and any developments that we would do use agile methodology, which gives you a fairly early indication of any problems rather than waiting a long time scale between specification and engagement with suppliers, and they may come back a few months later and, as Nigel says, come back with something that wasn't what we had expected to receive. But the move to agile makes that much more likely to be picked up in those short sprints. And we got early indication then of the code. So because the development was all on the supplier side, we didn't see the code that was being delivered until late on, and we had an agreement then with the suppliers that we could get access to that code and test that ourselves. So it was a much higher level of reassurance whenever the system was delivered to us that it would work. There were still some issues, but a lot of them had been ironed out because of that. But that was because lessons learnt were taken on board, and there was a significant change in the approach that we had adopted with the supplier, which did turn around the project.
And just to maybe add to that, Patsy, and on the wider NICS, I mean, project delivery as a profession is now widely recognised across the NICS, and we do need to enhance skills and capability. And every department now is meant to have in place a programme and project support office, and they bring expertise that they can share across a department, and that would include things like they would get the gateway reports, they would bring them in, and they would send out any lessons that others should learn. They also come in before a project even kicks off to make sure that the project team has the right skills. Somebody like me as a senior responsible owner has the right skills. There's also requirements on accounting officers to issue letters to senior responsible owners setting out exactly what our roles are and how we're meant to undertake those roles. So I think that we recognise the importance of continuous improvement, particularly around our own skill sets, which will help us manage some of these projects. And as already been alluded to, we look to our colleagues in CPD to ensure that those suppliers that we bring in do have the necessary capacity and capability within the confines of a contract to deliver a project, because I suppose one of the things we don't want is it's not a race to the bottom. The cheapest isn't always best. So we need to make sure that those that are supplying our IT systems or developing our IT systems have the capability to do
Look,
that.
I think, folks, we're getting into a whole different theory there, but it is useful to hear that explanation. Appreciate that, because it does help to put it into some context as well. But we're getting into a whole new basis around the civil service and CPD that I don't want to get into here today. But look, Brian, Nigel and Paul, thank you very much for your presentation. Very helpful for the update, and do appreciate it. And obviously I'm assuming we'll be hearing in another period as to how the next phase is going.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, members, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the Department's written briefing, synopsis of responses to the consultation on inshore vessel monitoring systems. I refer you to pages 60 to 81 of the pack for the written briefing from the Department dated the 1st of May 2024 regarding the consultation on the inshore vessel monitoring systems. You'll see there, members, that the Department held a public consultation on proposals for all registered fishing vessels under 12 metres in length, licensed to fish and operate in Northern Ireland waters, and to have operational inshore vessel monitoring systems. Proposal also applied to Northern Ireland registered under 12 metre fishing vessels wherever they fish. This will impact approximately 170 vessels. The intent is for financial support for the systems to be made available through a future DAERA Marine and Fisheries Financial Assistance Scheme, which I don't think is in place yet, but that's the plan. Fisheries Act 2020 commits the UK to preparing fisheries management plans. DAERA is committed to preparing an inshore fishery management plan for Northern Ireland for its key commercial shellfish stock, and the monitoring systems will be a vital instrument. The prohibition on fishing without the monitoring systems will be provided for in a statutory rule. Next steps are that DAERA will publish its response to the monitoring systems consultation and develop a programme of work to implement the proposals. Any comments? Michelle?
Thanks, Chair. I think it might be useful to get some more information just in relation to the financial package, because every fisherman going to sea, just to go out to sea, the cost is eye-watering, and every regulation brings with it a cost. And I suppose it's whether or not the financial package will be sort of a partial assistance for purchasing these devices, whether or not it will pay for them in their entirety, the maintenance of, replacement of. So if we could get some information just with regards to what the intent is around the financial package.
Do we know any idea of the cost? No.
At this stage, we don't.
No.
We'll ask that first, Michelle, maybe at some stage, whenever it's more developed, we might need them up for an oral briefing, if that's fair. John?
Well, the general outline mentioned there by Michelle, and also perhaps timeline on development of this package as well, added in.
Okay.
For clarification.
All right, happy with that? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 9, Department written briefing on the publication of the UK Marine Strategy Programme of measures by DEFRA. You'll find on pages 83 to 170 of your pack a written briefing dated the 1st of May 2024 from the Department on the publication of the Programme of Measures by DEFRA, which is part 3 of the UK Marine Strategy. It provides a framework for delivering marine policy at the UK level and sets out how clean, healthy, safe, productive and biologically diverse oceans and seas will be achieved and maintained. This appears to be just for noting at the moment, but some of the background is that Lord Benyon, DEFRA Minister of State for Climate, Environment and Energy, has sought agreement of Minister Muir and the other devolved ministers to proceed with the publication in the spring of 2024 of the Marine Strategy Part 3 and the Government response to the Marine Strategy Part 3 consultation is at Annex B. The previous ERA Committee noted a written briefing on Part 3 of the Summary of Responses on the 16th of March 2022 and was content that the Department proceeds to the next stage of the strategy, updating the publishing the Programme of Measures document. DEFRA has delayed the publication due to the competing priorities. Minister Muir plans to agree to the publication and to issue a reply to Lord Benyon. Are you content to note at this stage? I don't think we need to do anything, it seems to, unless anybody has any significant issues.
Yeah, again, Chair, so much of this actually impacts upon the local fishing industry, and I think it would be useful to have a conversation with them in the not too distant future in respect of.
It was our forward we're programmed to have them up, Michelle, as well. So yeah.
Chair,
and a visit to Coquille potentially.
Yeah. Okay, John.
If we could come in here, yeah, and I'd be keen to see if we're getting any updates on this, that the environmental aspects of the plan are built into those updates. Whilst it's good to see in the report that the fish stock situation, for example, in terms of good environmental status, are improving. They're not quite on target, improving but not on target. There are other issues around marine seabirds where we're falling very far short, in fact, so the environmental updates are crucial. All that said, though, I'm keen that it progresses and that we note it today, because I think the department mentions in the briefing that the holistic approach by the different regions is essential to get where we need to be.
Okay. Happy enough then to proceed. Okay, agenda item 10 is correspondence. Refer you to correspondence memo in your packs at page 172, and all the correspondence can be found in pages 173 to 206 of your pack. Just draw your attention to a couple. 10.2, correspondence from the clerk to the Committee for Communities dated the 19th of April 2024, pages 173 to 174 in the pack. Committee is requesting that all departments take poverty into account when considering their budget. Well, we can say much on that. Do we see the
If I could venture, the whole issue of rural development and rural development funds, and how they previously played a very important role in helping many of our rural isolated communities, it would be a big concern of mine just as to how any substitute is going to be put in place to help that through.
Okay. I suppose we're going to need to see a more detailed budget
Yes.
from the department at this stage anyway. Okay. 11th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, pages 175 to 182, it's just for noting. 10.4 members, again, is copied correspondence from the Chair of the House of Lords Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework to Gareth Davis MP, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, dated 25th of April 2024. It's pages 183 to 184 in the pack. It's in connection with two EU proposals. One is the regulation of the European Parliament and of the Council establishing a carbon border adjustment mechanism, and two, a directive of the European Parliament and of the Council amending Directive 2003/87 EC regarding greenhouse gas emission allowance trading. That seems to be just around trading of these carbons emission budgets or whatever they are. All content to note.
Chair, actually, if you don't mind,
Yes,
just
Michelle.
if you read the letter, it's actually very critical of the Minister and the response that he gave, and it's actually constraining the ability of that committee and the House to scrutinise the issue. So it would be probably, I know we're only being copied into this, probably just as a courtesy, but it'd be interesting to see what else is outstanding and what the Minister, I suppose, provided in response. It's actually, prompted this letter.
Mm-hmm. Do you want us to write to them?
Well, I suppose if we even wrote to our own Minister, just noting the correspondence and the fact that it's a very critical letter, and what the department then is going to do to address that with regards to information.
Okay. Happy with that, members? Okay. Okay, all agreed? Thank you. 10.5 is again 12th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules dated 3rd of May 2024, pages 185 to 192. It did note one issue, the packaging waste data reporting number 2 amendment regulation Northern Ireland in the report, but has not drawn any attention to it. So, just for noting. 10.6 members, correspondence from the department dated 3rd of May 2024, pages 193 to 206. DERA proposes to issue a targeted stakeholder consultation on the HOPS Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. It is proposed that the consultation will launch on week commencing 6th of May 2024, which is past actually, and will last for 8 weeks. Draft regulations amend the previous regulations, the HOPS Certification Regulation 1979, as they apply here, primarily to provide enforcement powers for updated EU rules on HOPS certification and HOPS imports from third countries, which are directly applicable in Northern Ireland. I'm assuming that's to protect our own industries, isn't it? That's my reading from it. That fair? Okay, happy to note, or have you any comments?
Might it be useful to have a briefing on this at some stage?
The consultation's only 8 weeks, you see, Michelle, so it's fairly short.
Yes. It still would be probably useful just to get an understanding of really what the impact
Okay,
of
do
this
you want
will
an
be.
oral briefing, or?
I think oral briefing is probably more beneficial, isn't it?
Okay. Have enough? Okay, agenda item 11, any other business? Any other business? No. Next meeting will take place on Thursday, 16th of May 2024, 10 a.m. in this room. We have still, before you think of rushing off, we have still agenda item 13, which is the legislative consent motion, pet adoption bill, and the committee report. The draft committee report on the pet abduction bill is starting at page 15 in your table papers. We've only had a short time scale to consider this LCM. However, we know that the Westminster bill has been welcomed by key stakeholders, as indeed it has here by the stakeholders here. Once it receives royal assent in Westminster, it will require a commencement order to introduce the provisions in Northern Ireland prior to the introduction of that order. The Department intends to engage with stakeholders in Northern Ireland so that there will be a further opportunity for stakeholders to comment. If you're content, we'll now go into private session to consider the draft report and then return to public session to note any decisions on the public record. Okay, happy?
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
Session to note any changes and agree the report. So we're back in public session. Thank you, Damien. So members, the committee has agreed to support the Minister's legislative consent motion on the pet abduction bill and to recommend to approve by the Assembly. I'm assuming that comes after all. Yes, so do we go through each section?
Yes, I just do formal agreement on each of the sections, pending the addition of issues that were raised today.
Okay, members, some issues were raised today that will be included in the report. So can I go through the report in sections and agree or otherwise? Powers and membership is the first section. Can I have agreement?
Agreed.
Okay. List of abbreviations. Agreed.
Agreed.
The background.
Agreed.
Agreed.
That brings you up to paragraph 10. Committee consideration of the legislative consent memorandum of the 11th of April 2024. That's paragraphs 11 to 24. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, committee meeting of the 2nd of May 2024. That's paragraphs 25 to 31. Agreed? Committee meeting of today, which includes the RAISE briefing and the department briefing, which is sections or paragraphs 32 to 50. Agreed? The position in other jurisdictions is 51, and we'll take responses from stakeholders in that too, which is paragraphs 52 to 67. All agreed?
Yeah.
And the conclusion, which is paragraph 68 to 75. All agreed? And the list of appendices, of which there are 5. All agreed? Okay.
Chair, could I just state for the record then, if we receive the response from the PSNI, it will be included in the final report as well, or appended afterwards. And again, I will add in the various issues that were raised in the public sessions today.
Okay. All agreed?
Yep, agreed.
Thank you very much for your cooperation, members. That ends the meeting.
Committee Room 21. Sound.